The Shepnaz Podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shepnaz Podcast. I'm Joe and I'm your host today. And for today's episode, we're going to take a look back at a message from Pastor Nick as we started our Rhythms of Grace series. While Pastor Rob was preaching in Gehenna, Pastor Nick was sharing a similar but different message in Johnstown. And we're going to go to his message now based on Mark chapter 1, verses 16 through 20, talking about how the invitation of Jesus is a life of transformation, not simply conversion. Here's Pastor Nick.
I want to take you back with me to grade school. As I was reflecting in preparation for this, I can remember in grade school, I won't tell you how many years ago, it was a few. Maybe, we're talking about Cheney just turned 30 yesterday, and some people are like, wow, that just seems hard to believe. Well, I'm a little bit older than Cheney, okay? Somewhere, a little bit. I'll let you figure it out. But I remember in grade school, I can remember in our classrooms growing up, all through the grades, there would be classroom rewards, okay, for different things. You could get different rewards for all different kinds of reasons. Things like good behavior, right? If you were good in class and were behaving how you should be, you could get a reward. Other things like if you got a perfect score on your math test or spelling test, or maybe being kind to someone or helpful, you could get a reward based on those things. And I remember some of those rewards really moved the needle, okay? Some of them were pretty motivating as I remember them. One of the things being you could pick a prize from the prize box, okay? That was super motivating for a second grader. Those prize boxes had things like stickers or candy or, get this, pencils. Ooh. Now, these weren't ordinary pencils, okay? These pencils had your favorite sports teams on them. So, of course, you wanted that pencil. I remember in fourth grade, our class had class hamsters. Yeah, we had class hamsters. I don't know why, but this teacher every year would get the class hamsters, and they would be there for pretty much the entire year. And I remember one reward, for whatever reason, you could get to spend time with the hamsters. During recess, while everyone else had gone to recess, you could stay back with the teacher, and you could pick a friend to stay and play with the hamsters. That was pretty awesome. You could get them out of their cage and let them run all around the classroom, and it was a lot of fun. I remember I got that reward one time. But by far, the most desired reward I can remember in grade school was being the line leader for a week. Remember, did any of you have line leaders? Am I taught? Okay. All right. Well, I will explain if you're unfamiliar with line leader, if you can't put two and two together. Line leader was anytime your class would line up to go somewhere, you got to be the one at the front of the line, leading the way. And this was a big deal, okay? This was a big deal for grade school kids because there was a little bit of independence involved in being the line leader, right? You were out front, you were leading the way, right? There was also a little bit of superiority or arrogance, just being honest, okay? Because you were out front, you were the one that everyone in the class was following and looking to. You were that person, okay? So it was a big deal. It was a big deal. But as I reflect on this even now, and as you're thinking about this even now, what you don't realize at the time of grade school, what you don't realize, while there was this perceived out in front, not following anyone else, that there was this perceived independence involved, do you know what else there was? There was a teacher leading the way, right? There was this perceived independence in that you were the one leading, but it really wasn't that because the teacher was the one who was out front, right? And even if the teacher wasn't out front, the teacher was the one dictating, this is where you go, this is how you walk, this is what you do or don't do. So even though there was this perceived, it really wasn't all that it was thought to be as a grade school kid. You were going where the teacher was telling you to go. And here's why I share that story with us this morning. Not just to take you down memory lane, okay? It took me down memory lane. But I share that story to pose this to us this morning. The question for us this morning is not if we are following, if you are following someone or something or not. That's not the question. The question for us, for you this morning, is who or what you are following. It's not a matter of if, it's who or what are you following. Who or what is leading the way of your life. You know, there's some perception, some false perception that's out there today. This false perception of independence, right? That a person is the one leading the way of their life, that they're the one dictating what happens. That they are not following anyone or anything else. But you know where that idea comes from? Someone else. You're following the idea that you are in charge of your life, that anything goes. Pursue your truth. Your truth is your truth. Do you. These phrases that we hear, there's this false perception of independence, and that no one else is in charge of your life except for you. That's an external idea coming from somewhere else. So the matter is not if, but who or what. And here's why that's so important. To ask who or what you are following, who or what is leading the way of your life is so important, because who or what you are following is what is forming you. Okay? Who or what you follow forms you. The invitation of Jesus is what? I read it this morning. It's come, follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people. 2,000 years ago, Jesus gave this invitation to who? To some fishermen, right? It's that same invitation, though, that is given to all of us today. Come, follow him. 2,000 years ago, those fishermen's lives were transformed, right? Because Jesus says, if you follow me, I will take you who fish for what? Fish for fish. And I will transform your life to people, to fishermen who fish for people. So let me ask you this morning. Are you being transformed by Jesus? That's the invitation that he gives. Come follow me is an invitation to come be transformed. See, the invitation of Jesus that he gives is an invitation to life transformation, not simply conversion. This is super important, okay? The invitation of Jesus is a life of transformation, not simply conversion, right? We're familiar, you may be familiar, with the Great Commission of Jesus, right? Jesus' final words that he gave to his disciples was what? Jesus, with all authority that was given to him in heaven and on earth, he said, go, therefore, and make believers. That would make a lot of sense, right? No, he didn't say that. Go and therefore and make converts. Go therefore and make church attenders. No. Go therefore and make church tithers. No, he didn't say any of those. I heard it. Go and make disciples was the commission, the Great Commission given to Jesus' followers. Go and make disciples. And see, I think right there is where the loss in understanding has taken place over the years. What Jesus meant with the invitation of come follow me, we have maybe a little bit of interpretation drift or mission drift, whatever you want to call it, loss of understanding, loss of meaning, what he meant by that. See, I believe what we have done is we've substituted disciple. That's what Jesus is talking about. Come follow me is be my disciple. We have substituted disciple with Christian. But Jesus gave the Great Commission not to go and make Christians. He said, go and make disciples. We have substituted following Jesus with simply filling out connect cards, marking that we prayed a prayer. Just being honest. I'm the one that encourages marking on your connect card that you prayed a prayer. But what we have turned this calling into this invitation of Jesus is simply to to say we prayed a prayer, and oftentimes this is done with out of fear, fire insurance. You don't want to go one place. So I'll believe in you, Jesus. So we kind of get this get out of jail free card, or as I've said it before, sometimes following Jesus has been turned into, I've got my golden ticket to heaven, and that's it. Jesus invites you and me to follow him. To be his disciples is what he means right there. More than just believers. I know that kind of sounds weird, right? Right? But the scriptures also say this, that you believe there is one God. That's great, but guess who else believes there is one God? Demons believe in God. Demons believe that there is one God. That's from James chapter 2, verse 19. But the difference is believers who then actively follow him and pursue him. See, there is, of course, belief and trust and faith in Jesus and who he is and what he's done and what he wants to do. But then there's also this movement and action and realignment that takes place accordingly. Amen? There's this movement. When he says, come follow me, do you know what that implies? A following. Movement, action, moving and pursuing towards him and his way. I think we've lost a little bit of that over the years. We've made it seem, all of these things have really made it seem that you can, have confused some people that think you can be a Christian without being a disciple. Just believe these set of beliefs, just say this prayer, and you're good to go. I'm not going to play God, okay? But to call that a disciple, as Jesus understands it, I don't think is accurate. I'm reminded growing up in the town I grew up in, about, hour and 20 minutes from here, northwest Ohio, outside of Lima, a little town called Waynesfield. Anybody heard of Waynesfield? Of course not. There was 40 kids in my graduating class, 1,200 in the whole village of Waynesfield, okay? But I would guess, just by estimation, growing up, that 99% of Waynesfield were Christian people. That's a high percentage. That's just a guess. I'm just pulling out of nowhere. But the point being that everyone who I came across growing up was a Christian. Because what else would you be, right? Oh, I know I'm not this or that, or so I must be a Christian. But see, where along the lines, along those years growing up, I began to notice something. These people who call themselves Christians look nothing like Christ. But yet they're Christian. But see, some have come to this belief that you can indeed be a Christian without being a disciple, and I would push back on that. To be a Christian is to be a disciple, to be a follower of Jesus. And what does that mean? For us to really understand what Jesus is saying with that invitation of come, follow me, we really need to understand discipleship as Jesus understood it. Jesus, newsflash, did not invent discipleship. Okay? Jesus did not come up with that system. He did not come up with that relationship. Discipleship had been around. Discipleship is what takes place. It's the relationship, the process that takes place between a disciple and a rabbi. Okay? It may become as a surprise to you, but Jesus was a rabbi. Jesus was a rabbi. Rabbi means master or teacher. And Jesus was a master and a teacher. These rabbis, so we really have to dive into this dynamic to really understand what Jesus meant with that invitation. See, these rabbis, they were spiritual masters. They were spiritual masters specifically in being teachers of the Torah or the scriptures at the time for those Jewish people, right? Rabbis then would eventually, as they would go through the process, rabbis would eventually come to have disciples. Disciples who would then follow and learn after their teacher, their master. And so this whole discipleship program It was, you could think of it like how we have our educational system to a degree, right? So starting very early on, a Jewish person would have similar to what we would have as our elementary, middle school years. They had this schooling called House of the Book, called Bet Sefer. Okay, so that's what they would have, and they would start this learning around the age of 5. And so they would go to the synagogue, and they would have their own room where they were taught orally the Torah being the scriptures, specifically Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They would be taught that verbally by their teacher, by their rabbi. And most, listen to this, most, starting at age 5, by the time they were 12 or 13-ish, they would have the entire Torah memorized. It's pretty good, right? So, at 12 or 13, they would go through that. And around that time, most of them were done. Okay, 12, 13, that's good enough. Most of them went back home to work on whatever the family business was, or to do other things at home with the family. They were sent back home. Now, a few of those who had gone through that would then go on to the next educational part. A few of the best and brightest of those groups would go on to another level of education called the House of Learning. So the first one was the House of the Book. The second was the House of Learning, or the Midrash. And they would do this studying until about the age of 17. By then, get this, around 17-ish, they would have the entire Old Testament memorized. Pretty good, right? Anybody have the entire Old Testament memorized? No. Now, 17, okay, almost all of the people at this point were done. Okay? That's quite the accomplishment, right? Learned a lot, memorized a lot. However, the best of the brightest and best, would then apply for an apprenticeship under a rabbi, that they would commit their life to go and learn and follow them, to be taught by this extended period of time for around 12 or so years, until around they were the age of 30. They would go and follow their rabbi and learn and follow and be taught by that rabbi. So, see, during this time, the disciples' motivating goal was to be with his rabbi, to become like his rabbi, and to do as his rabbi. Let me read those again. The primary motivating goal of a disciple was to be with, to become like, and to do as his rabbi. That was the whole point of existence. To be with, to become like, and to do as the rabbi did. There was this saying that was going around at the time that they would say, "May you be covered in the dust of your rabbi." Because the idea behind that was, as wherever the rabbi was going on the dirt roads, that you would follow so closely and so intently that the very dust that the rabbi kicks up would then cover you. I think about this in my context a little bit, specifically with cross country. Growing up, I did that through middle school and high school, cross country. But on occasion, we would do, after usually large rains would come, we would do what was called, I don't know if this is a thing everywhere, if it was just us at Waynesfield, but we would do what was called Rambo runs. Is that a thing that anybody has ever heard of? Okay, maybe so. It was maybe just made up by somewhere, Waynesfield sometime, but we would call these Rambo runs, and the whole point was, after these large rains, it was always fun to do Rambo runs, because during those practices, there would be one leader of the entire team. And the whole point of the practice was, you have to follow that leader wherever the leader goes. Into the mud, into the water, wherever. And so you would follow, the entire team would follow in this line, following after the leader, being with that leader, becoming like that leader, perhaps muddy, oftentimes muddy, and doing as that leader. This is what Jesus understood and the people at the time understood by discipleship. This is what they understood it to look like and to be like. And so we hear this today and we think, what? Discipleship is pretty radical, right? That's okay. Discipleship is indeed radical in nature. Listen to Mark chapter 8, verse 34. Jesus said this, "Then he called out to the crowd, called the crowd to him along with his disciples, and said," this is Jesus talking, "Whoever wants to be my disciple," okay, "whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." Whoever wants to be a disciple of Jesus must what? Take up their cross, deny themselves, and follow him. That's pretty radical, right? That's pretty radical, church, to give up your own way, your own thought, your own life, and to follow Jesus and his way and his thoughts and his life. See, let's go back to Mark. And look, when Jesus gave this invitation, "Come, follow me." As Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come, follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." Then what does verse 18 say? At once they left their nets and followed him. At once. They left everything, right? Their job, their whole means of living. They left their nets where they were and followed him. In verse 19, when he had gone a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat preparing their nets. And without delay, he called them, and they left their father in the boat with the hired men and followed him. Discipleship is radical in nature, church. These very first disciples of Jesus left everything. They left their nets. They left their own family. It says at once they did this. Now, when we read that, when I hear it, even just as I'm saying it out this morning, we think, wow, that is indeed radical. Now, don't misunderstand. Please do not pack up your house, leave your spouse, leave whoever, and just say, "I'm following Jesus," and never look back. Please don't do that. Okay? Because this isn't so much as about total abandonment, like it might initially sound. It's not so much about total abandonment as it is about total commitment. See, what is making clear from this passage is that for those disciples, everything else was now secondary to Jesus. Even the good things, right? Even the good jobs or the good family become secondary to following Jesus. What that means is your life and your relationships, hear me when I say this, your life and your relationships can never be what God desires or even what you desire them to be if your priorities are not clear and properly ordered. Okay? So yes, love your spouse, love your mother and father, love your kids, work hard at your jobs, but listen, do not live your life for those things. Do not commit your life to those things. You are not living for them. It's only when you follow Jesus and commit your life to Jesus that all of those other things then make sense and are able to be what they were originally desired and designed to be. Jesus calls for complete commitment, not just to believe in him, but to be totally committed to him, and specifically in becoming like him. Going where he goes, doing what he does, loving who he loves, serving how he serves. This was what Jesus had in mind when he says, "Come, follow me." And here's where I think we've lost our way. Is for this to be the understanding, over time, what we said, that is a little bit radical. That is a little bit intense. And maybe, Jesus, you really don't understand, And over time, what has happened is commitment has been withheld from being a total commitment to a perhaps partial, maybe, commitment, because totally committed would cost us our convenience and comfort. Following Jesus, hear me, won't always be convenient and comfortable. Amen? Following Jesus won't always be convenient or comfortable. There will be times where following Jesus leads you to step out of your comfort zone to do things that you don't want to do, in ways that perhaps you don't want to do them. And you can try to spin Mark chapter 8, verse 34, where Jesus says, whoever wants to be my disciple must take up their cross, deny themselves, and follow me. You can try to spin that, well, maybe Jesus, there's no getting around really what Jesus actually meant. It's giving up all of you and your desires, your way of doing things, right? Jesus didn't say, whoever wants to be my follower, if the day feels right, follow me. He didn't say, whoever wants to be my disciple, unless it's inconvenient time, right? And this is a more than just a 1 hour on Sunday morning type of commitment, church. Is that too hard? I don't know. Am I being harsh? This totally committed to Jesus is about loving people who are hard to love at times. It's about forgiving people who maybe seem unforgivable. It's about giving up what you think, want, desire, and taking on what Jesus thinks, wants, and desires for your own life, for the lives of others, but also for the world at large. This is what Jesus meant with the invitation, come follow me. So simple, but yet pretty serious, right? Now, there's just one more element I think is important to point out with this whole discipleship relationship. See, when a disciple, they would go through, those people who would go through that educational system, they would go through all the memorization, they would come to this point of being, the cream of the crop, right? They had rose to the top. When it was time for a disciple to apply for an apprenticeship under a rabbi, it was a pretty rigorous process to become that. To become a disciple with a rabbi. To be a disciple, first of all, you had to find a rabbi. You had to find a rabbi that was appealing, how they would interpret the scriptures and apply them, and you'd have to find that rabbi, and then you would have to ask to be their disciple. You'd have to find whoever this was and say, can I follow after you? I want to commit my life to you. Will you have me? And then the rabbi wouldn't just take on any old person, any old disciple, because it was very important for a rabbi to be associated with disciples who were not going to hurt their reputation, who were not going to make their name bad. The rabbi wouldn't put his own self at risk with this. So the process would be kind of intense, right? They would ask things like, how well do you know the Torah? How much do you have memorized? What's your take on this passage or that passage? How often do you pray? They would ask these very pointed questions. And then going through that process, if you passed, if you came out on the other side, and the rabbi said, okay, you can be my disciple. Hearing all this, you might be thinking, wow, if that's what it takes to become a disciple. We just got done saying we don't really have the Old Testament memorized or the Torah memorized. How could we ever become a disciple, right? But notice how Jesus approaches this. Jesus was not a normal rabbi because he wasn't just a rabbi. He wasn't just a rabbi. He's Messiah. So he wasn't just interested in being teacher, master. He came to be Lord and Savior. So this calling, this invitation is not just one of, this disciple-rabbi relationship. It's a prophetic call. It's a prophetic call to say, come out of the life that you know it and enter into one that I have for you. See, Jesus' approach is this. It's different because the normal situation was the disciple had to ask the rabbi. But what does Jesus do? Jesus did the choosing. He didn't give a test. He gave an invitation to come, follow me. And these fishermen, they knew how the whole thing worked and that this was not normal. They hear this invitation, come follow me. Just guessing that they were probably the ones that went home at 12 or 13 to go back to being fishermen and learn how to fish. Now here Jesus is saying, I want you to follow me. I want you to learn after me. I want you to be with me, to become like me. So we read this story and think, wow, how could they have just left everything immediately, without hesitation? At once, they left and followed Jesus. Because they knew this was not normal. This was not normal. Jesus did the choosing. And how good it must have been to be chosen by Jesus. In John chapter 15, verse 16, you did not choose me, Jesus says, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit to become like Jesus. Fruit that will last, so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give to you. Jesus says, you did not choose me, but I chose you. See, discipleship, to be a disciple of Jesus, is very much a gift, church. It's a gift. Because Jesus chose us. Chose you, chose me. The calling of Jesus is not limited, hear this, is not limited to a select few, as perhaps the standard was. You had to be this, you had to be that. The calling, the invitation of Jesus is for whoever. It's for whoever. Mark chapter 8, verse 34. Then he called to the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, whoever wants to be my disciple. Whoever wants to be my disciple. You know who's included in whoever? There's some pretty intense people in that. Whoever wants to be my disciple, Jesus says. Whoever, maybe that's fishermen, or zealots, or tax collectors, or betrayers, or people who are devoted to the scriptures, or prostitutes. Whoever includes religious bigots or women caught in adultery. It could be the intellectually elite, or simply a blind beggar. The invitation of Jesus is for whoever. And whoever means whoever. You do not come into in contact with a person that Jesus hasn't given the invitation to. It's a blanket invitation, whoever.
Well, we pray that you've enjoyed and been challenged by this message from Pastor Nick, and realizing the opportunity that we have to be a believer, that it's not just limited to a select few, but Jesus extends the offer to whoever will follow. You can follow everything that's going on at the church by going to shepnaz.org. Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For Pastor Nick, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.